Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a comparison that a lot of you have been asking for and waiting for, of course. I'm going to be looking at the current and new for 2020 Seiko Alpinist and comparing it to the Blue Alpinist, and then of course the classic SARB017. Now, I think these three Alpinists, of course, are kind of the key main players in what you're going to see today. And also, this is great. I'm filming this as of right now. There was actually leaks. Seiko accidentally posted pictures of their upcoming baby Alpinists that aren't going to have the inner rotating bezel. And they look really great. If you haven't seen those leaked shots, make sure you subscribe to the channel because they're actually in my community tab. So once you're in there, you're going to get those updates and everything like that. Also, check out my Instagram. I have some shots there as well. I was also covering some specs. But what we're gathered here today to do is to look at this SBDC087 here on the far left, and really compare it to this SPB089 Blue US Limited Edition, as well as, the classic green SARB017 JDM model. So I'm going to talk about some of the similarities, some of the differences, and, just really get into it for those of you who maybe don't have an Alpinist yet and you feel like you need to pick one up, and you're wondering, which way is the direction that you should go or could go, or maybe you just are wondering what the heck all the hype is about, so you clicked on this video. So with all that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look. Okay, so a little bit. First, this is actually on the factory OEM bracelet. It actually comes with this model out from right out of the box. This blue model I actually have on the aftermarket bracelet that most people, it's not an aftermarket, it's actually the OEM bracelet. It doesn't come with this model, but many people fitted it to this model, essentially because there were previous models of the Alpinist line that did come on bracelet. This one did not. It actually came on kind of a brown crocodile. I currently have it on this really cool Vario 2-piece, and I think it really plays well with the color combination, and I think it really speaks to kind of the nature of the Alpinist watch, so or at least what made it very famous. And again, this is not the first Alpinist that there ever was, but I will probably say that this is the reason why many people got into the Alpinist, because it's such a quirky, different watch that's also very, very capable. The actual Alpinist line goes back a long ways back, guys. It's one of Seiko's first sports watches. They didn't always have these internal bezels, but they basically caught a lot of popularity with the internal bezel, and this model is probably what took this particular kind of niche model of just the general Alpinist line into kind of the limelight in a mainstream collector, because it just gained so much popularity, in various markets, to include the US market, of course, which is where I'm located. So all of these pretty much share the same case. The main difference is going to be the case back. Here you can see solid case back, and it makes it a little bit thinner because the profile, as you can see the profile there, which is going to be the same here for the Blue Alpinist as well. If you take a look, similar thickness there because of, again, solid case back. So with the new model, of course, although it does have a new movement, it also is a bit thicker in comparison. As you can see here, not a lot thicker, maybe not even visually thicker when you really take a look here, but it is a little bit, just a hair thicker, essentially. It's basically going to be 13.2 versus a 12.2, so a millimeter thicker to have that display back window, but it does show this newer movement, which does have a 70-hour power reserve versus the 50-hour power reserve found in the 6R15, and then here is the 6R35. Now, another difference you might notice is the Cyclops, but not just the Cyclops, but the execution of the date window. Here you can see contrasting date window with the white disc with black font. Here you have the black with white. Also here, black with white. And these are framed date windows as opposed to the higher contrast. So that's one change also. The date window, even if you pop off this, the Cyclops, the magnifier there, because you can easily do that. You just basically heat it up with a lighter and then scrape it off with a razor blade. Essentially what's underneath is an unadorned date window. As you can see here though, previously it was framed, which I think if they would have framed it, it probably would have made it look even busier. I mean, this is already quite a crowded affair when it comes to the amount of information that's on the dial because of that rotating bezel. So I can totally see why they wanted to keep it simple if they were going to really focus on making that date more of a key feature and focus point. So that complication, and I mean, that's a really excellent execution of a magnifier. You can see it does a great job magnifying and is definitely very useful versus some magnifiers you'll see, which basically don't get very many times larger. But you can see here comparison, the 8's definitely much more legible on this new model. Now the bracelets are very similar. So if you were to get, they pretty much would be interchangeable, guys. The really only difference again is that thickness. That slight thickness is going to probably have you use your micro adjusts a little bit differently, depending on if your wrist is swollen or not swollen, and on a summer's day or whatnot. That little thickness is pretty much gonna be the only difference, but the bracelet in close comparison, I gotta say, is quite similar. I mean, they are marked differently. As you can see here on the inside, take a look, you see it says 411 on the top link. Here you're going to see 111 on the top link. But when you compare here, similar contouring, if not exactly the same. All milled out, very nice. Similar friction fit pin, but it's a nice friction fit pin. I think one of the better. It's not just your basic split pin. It actually does have a bit more design element to it. And one thing also that is much different is, as you can see, look at the reflectiveness here with an AR coating versus non-AR coating. I'm going to try to make it to where you can see the reflection of the lens on the camera. Definitely does a better job of hiding it on this model here. If we take a reflection, we even sneak those in. The way the anti-reflective coating really makes this much more legible. Here you're going to catch, look at, you can even up close where I normally can hide a lot of the glare, you can still see very faintly the reflection of the camera lens, versus here it does a great job of blocking it out, and just you can just focus on that beautiful matte dial. So there's definitely a nice treat there to have that anti-reflective coating. I don't believe it's colored. I believe Seiko actually does a clear anti-reflective coating, so you're not going to see any different fades or hues in there in reflection. But you know, that's a difference. These two are still very, very similar. I mean, pretty much brothers from the same mother. As you can see, signed crown. So that is something you have to think about when you're screwing down your crown, because these are screw down crowns. And then they just have slightly different case backs. The etching here is deeper. I would say it's almost like a stamp, and then here it's a very clear etching with the limited edition, but it's not deep at all. It's definitely a very surface level etch there. And it does say Alpinist. These new models don't actually say Alpinist on them, but they are definitely marketed as Alpinist watches. So before anybody says, oh, this is a Prospex model inspired by the Alpinist, this is an Alpinist, and there's actually been a history, I think since like the 90s, of Seiko Alpinist watches within the Prospex line. Obviously they don't market putting the X on everything is something that's new. Also removing signed crowns in the Prospex line is also something that has changed as well. So no signed crown versus signed crown. Oh, let it focus. There you go. So that's another difference. And then if you guys want the full specs on these bad boys, definitely check the channel. There's more in-depth reviews. This is more just of a kind of compare and contrast here. So with all that, let's actually move into some on the wrist feedback. All right, here's the modern 2020 Alpinist on the wrist. Love this thing. Again, I'm filming, of course, in my kind of dark studio room here that I have set up in my house. So it's essentially a dark room with 2 studio lights, one on each side. So the reflections on these chrome markers are going to be a little bit harder to read because there's no real reflection for anything to come off of. Let me take like a piece of white paper and put it on top. You can see a little bit easier there to see the actual contrast, how that's going to render. But because the room has darkness right above you, it's going to maybe be a little bit less legible. But that is just the studio situation. That's not something that actually affects legibility when you're wearing this out in the world. And these pretty much wear all exactly the same. Although it is just a hair thicker, a millimeter anyway, it's pretty much going to wear the same. I do like these on the factory bracelet. I like the wider center link, and there are other bracelets that fit this watch. Pretty much most Submariner style bracelets are going to fit with maybe a little bit of a wiggle of the old spring bar, but essentially they're going to fit pretty well. Although this isn't the perfect setup, you know, a lot of people complain about kind of that gap in the clasp right there. It doesn't really bother me. You know, I do like the proportions. I like the thinness of the link. I think it's very well balanced, and I like the thickness of the center link. And I think it really flows well with the case. But also, of course, it wears great, just like you would expect. I will say the older Alpinist, if you're going to maybe put it onto a NATO strap or a raft strap or something that's going to weave underneath, well, that's one thing to really take into account. So if you're going to buy an Alpinist, and let's say you just want it to be a strap monster, and maybe you're going to be all about one-piece straps, the older models, and to include the blue Alpinist here, do have slightly thinner case, so they'll work better as far as when you're putting them, you know, on one word. It's actually going to go, you know, if you're going to run a strap through it and it's going to add a little bit of height, you have a little bit more room to play, of course, with the older Alpinist versus the newer, which is a little bit thicker. So that might be something you might take into account. You might even go look up some older reference models if you really want a black dial one that's a little bit thinner with a 6R movement, 6R 15 versus the 35, and a sealed case back versus the display. You might want to look that up. This isn't a this isn't a one-piece strap. This is a 2-piece, so it doesn't really affect the thinness. But man, I feel like this Vario 2-piece Cordura strap really tells the story and just meshes well with the mojo and the vibe that this watch gives, being a real adventure watch, and really, you know, these being leaders in that kind of adventure watch category, in that field watch. Overbuilt. Of course, a field watch doesn't need to be 200 meters water resistant, but man, is it nice when it is. It gives you that whole air, land, and sea vibe, all-in-one watch, which is great because it's definitely meant to be a watch for the land, but it actually, I think, does a great job kind of being a general tool watch, multi-purpose watch, to include it even being a little bit dressy in certain lightings and certain situations. So really nice. You can see the original SARB that really kicked off a lot of the hype train that led here. Was first basically this watch being so popular, being so overly produced, and then becoming more and more scarce and eventually being discontinued. That created a lot of hype and a space in the market. And then Seiko came along and said, hey, let's do a US only special edition and let's see what the demand is like. Are people loving the out? And this thing like literally sold out within minutes of being listed on the Seiko USA website, as well as Hodinkee, who was one of the exclusive dealers. So some people will even call this a Hodinkee edition. It's not a Hodinkee edition watch. Hodinkee just had it in their shop because they were an authorized dealer for the release and worked in collaboration with Seiko. So one of the nice things is you do have, you know, of course, a very, very limited special edition here, only having 1959 units, and this is unit number 904. So these are pretty collectible and whatnot, if that's what you're interested in. And obviously the blue is infinitely versatile when it comes to your timepiece, and there is not a blue dial option, at least not yet available for the main Alpinist line in the re-release. There's pretty much black, two different white dials, one being more cream with gilt, and then one being more of a silver on silver kind of white ivory dial, and then of course a classic green dial being the other option, but it being a little bit darker than this model. And of course having the Cyclops with a white date disc, updated movement, and of course the display case back, which I'm totally fine with. Some people are upset about the display case back. I dig it. I think it's something that is a selling point, especially the fact that it still retains its 200 meters of water resistance and has a display case back. It just goes to show that this thing is built to a very nice tolerance, one that you can trust on a daily basis. So let's actually get this off the wrist here and do a little bit of lume comparison, which there really going to be no differences, and some low light transition to kind of close out my thoughts here. All right, so we'll go ahead and get this low light transition going. So you can see the lume here, very similar. It's not going to be a lot of difference. They're still pretty much loomed the same way. It's really just more so the angle that is giving you a little bit more reflection on the SARB017 there. That's SARB017, because it's at a bit of an angle because it's on a strap and it's sitting up a little bit more, as you can see. But one of the nice things is we do that low light transition, so you get a little bit of an idea of how these colors are going to render in less than perfect studio lighting that is you know, more indicative of direct sunlight. Here you're gonna get an idea in some little bit of harsher lighting situations, whether it's harsh and high contrast, and you can expose some of those imperfections in harshness in the finishing there. You can see that the way the dial reads, if you look at that black dial, it definitely has a certain level of extra clarity versus the two other models there with that clear anti-reflective coating. Really nice. Still excellent watches, all great wears from that aspect, and you can see still all quite legible. Pretty much just going with similar lume plot situation when it comes to that dial. And then you can see even the green dial does seem to capture the light a little bit more, and give you a little bit more of a dial legibility. And I wouldn't say necessarily the indice and the glow is any more or less, but it does capture the light more than the darker blue dial, as you can see, and of course more than the black dial. So really nice. You know, closing thoughts. You know, they wear really great, guys. These are great sports watches, everyday watches. Um, which one is for you, whether you're going to get a newer one, an older one, or a really older one. You know, that's really up to you guys. I did want to compare these because there's a lot of people that are really had their hearts set on the blue dial, the blue Alpinist, or even the classic green, that got a little bit confused when the new model came out, and they're wondering, is it worth the markup? Yes, there is a markup when it comes to the price. These are retailing for around $750, and that's a pretty common price, but you can get them for as low as around $600, $620, depending on the dealer you go to. And then, you know, the blue Alpinist being a limited model, you see that thing marked up. That the MSRP on it was about $600, but you're seeing them go, you know, depending on who's listing them and where. I mean, I've seen these things go, you know, be listed in the 900 to 1,000 range. I think that's a lot to pay for this watch, but it is limited and a lot of people want it, so, you know, you got to set it for the price people are willing to pay. So I can't really get mad at that. I wouldn't be selling mine anytime soon. My SARB017, I was pretty late to the game on the SARB, honestly. Even on the 035 and 033. So I just thought there were better values out there, even when these were quite cheap. When they were ranging in the 350 range, and now they're closer to 450. So you're looking at something that progressively will get more expensive as you go up. I do see definite value in the updated model, of course, being on bracelet from the factory, as well as having that clear coat, as well as having the updated movement. So I do think it's worth the money, if not more, because it is a watch that has a desirable lineage and, you know, and a cool story. And they're expanding the Alpinist line now this year, you know, with the new model coming out, 38 millimeters, another, it's going to have the updated movement still. It's going to also have sapphire with the inner AR coating. One of them is even going to be available on bracelet, which is really cool. And they're kind of going to be this same color scheme you're going to see here. There's a green textured kind of fume dial, there's a blue textured kind of fume dial, and then there's a blackish gray textured kind of fume dial, and then none of them have inner rotating bezels. The green one actually comes on bracelet, and then the black and the blue one come on some really interesting leather straps. I'm really excited about the black one. I think it's going to look really killer, and I'm probably gonna buy one and put it on a Tropic rubber strap, because I think that will just be an amazing kind of combination. That's just me though. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.